Now, as I mentioned before, infrastructure in Australia, in many locations, groaning under the weight of the population because there's more of us than we expected there to be. The population growth is actually quite a bit ahead of predictions from years ago. To explain, Andrew Howe from the Australian Bureau of Statistics has been nice enough to take our call. Andrew, good morning to you, sir.
Hi, Keir. Good morning to you.
Now, let's just first up set the scene as to how far ahead of population prediction we are at the moment.
Yeah, okay. It depends when you make those predictions. So there were some news reports last week which basically analysed the projections that the Australian Statistics made 20 years ago. Now, there is an art to predicting the population. However, ultimately, there are some fairly basic assumptions. You assume current trends continue, current trends in those components of population change, births, deaths and migration. 20 years ago, population trends were a lot different to today. Australia's population around 18 million, increasing by around 180,000 a year. Nowadays, you're looking at an increase of around 370,000 per year. So just in 20 years, our annual increase is twice as high as it used to be. Okay, so in a nutshell, projections we made, and not just the ABS, other academic organisations made 20 years ago, had Australia growing a lot slower than what we're currently seeing, and therefore, if you think of the milestone of 25 million, for example, 20 years ago we were projecting that wasn't going to happen for another 20 or so years. Now we're almost on the verge of 25 million. So things have changed and, projections have changed as well.
Does the Bureau sort of see a point at which the tracking started to alter away from what those predictions were, Andrew, that kind of gives a sense of what some of those factors are that have fed into the growth being higher?
Yeah. So compared to 20 years ago, we had an increase in the birth rate. Around 10 years ago, we saw an increase. So after birth rates declined for basically 3 decades, we actually had a reversal around 10 years ago, as I say. However, the major factor that changes population trends is overseas migration. Overseas migration currently explains more than half of Australia's population growth. 20 years ago, we're looking at around 70,000 people for the country. Last year, the net overseas migration figure was over 200,000. So yes, it's the overseas migration component which has led to the more recent...
Yes, it certainly sounds significant within it. So then we start to see the effects of that because, of course, governments, they plan using a lot of these predictions, I guess, Andrew. And so what kind of consequences does that sort of underestimation mean for infrastructure around cities and regions like Far North Queensland?
Yeah, population projection certainly an important component in planning, so it's important to use the most recent projections, which takes on the most recent population trends to make those very important decisions about where we put our hospitals, our schools, our roads. And if we want to, I guess, flip the coin a little bit, the latest ABS population projections produced 5 years ago now, 4 years ago, actually had Australia reaching 25 million sooner than today. So certainly, things change when population trends change, and it's important to use the most recent information when looking at projections.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we can see that, I think, in a lot of our own infrastructure, from health to education to the road network in Far North Queensland, just lagging behind where the need or the demand is actually at, Andrew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, schools are a really interesting one. As I say, increase in births across the whole country started around 10 years ago. No one really saw that coming, and in a lot of areas in Australia, and interestingly, in inner city areas of the major cities as well, suddenly there's no schools because the trends were not many people having kids back 10, 15 years ago, and suddenly now we have people having more kids, and therefore that increases the demand for schools in all parts of the country.
Yep. Okay, that makes total sense, Andrew. So, I mean, are we seeing, councils, planners, governments starting to actually rectify this, or do you think once it kind of gets beyond you, the horse is bolted a little bit?
Yeah, well, it's never too late to plan properly. But yes, required effort across all sectors, but obviously led by the government and using the most recent best quality population projections. That planning for those major infrastructure is very important.
And just finally, as you were talking about, regional areas and particularly Queensland and Queensland regional areas, we did see quite a spike in terms of interstate migration as well during those periods.
Yeah, Queensland's traditionally had more people entering the state than leaving. There has been strong population growth in the north there, the Cairns statistical region, which stems from basically Ingham up to around Daintree, an increase of around 33% in the last 20 years. Which is on line with Australia's population increase, around 33-34%. Yeah, with some growth pockets, especially within the Cairns the suburbs of Cairns itself.
Absolutely. Look, Andrew, this is a great analysis. I appreciate it because I think it also helps to inform just the kind of processing that we do about the issues that we face as well, and that it's not necessarily just about people being asleep at the wheel, if you know what I mean. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate it and your time this morning. Thank you.
No worries, Keith. Good to chat.
Back at you. That's Andrew Howe there from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, looking at how they did underestimate, not just them, but a lot of people working together underestimated just what that population growth would be, and of course has had that effect, that flow-on effect of seeing just infrastructure not being up to those demands.